The air smelled like cinnamon and something slightly burnt, probably the sweet potato casserole Tessa insisted on improving with marshmallows, as if reinventing family tradition made her bold and quirky. I stood at the edge of the kitchen, watching her bounce from counter to stove like a sitcom heroine, radiant in her pregnancy glow, while Mom hovered nearby offering unsolicited advice. Dad was in the den, predictably silent, sipping whiskey and staring into the fireplace like it owed him money. It was Thanksgiving, and I had made the 2-hour drive up from Boston to be here. I wasn't sure why anymore. Habit, maybe? Guilt, probably. Hope? Less and less of that lately. I shifted my weight from one foot to the other, balancing the pie I'd brought, my grandmother's recipe, made with a buttery crust and roasted pecans. I doubted anyone would touch it. Tessa's store-bought pumpkin creation already sat proudly in the center of the table, garnished with whipped cream and praise. "Dinner's ready," she called out in that performative sing-song voice of hers. Everyone took their places. I sat across from her, watching her lower herself carefully into her chair. She placed one hand protectively over her belly, the way expectant mothers do in movies. Noah, her husband, slid in beside her and kissed her temple. He caught me watching and smiled politely or smugly, I couldn't tell. Mom clinked her wine glass with a fork, signaling her latest tradition, going around the table to say what we were thankful for. "I'll go first," she said. "I'm thankful for family, especially this growing one," she beamed at Tessa, "and for new beginnings." Her eyes flicked to me for just a beat too long, like I was the old chapter she'd finally closed. Dad muttered something about health and the Patriots. Noah praised Tessa for being a warrior during the pregnancy. Tessa smiled like a pageant queen and declared she was thankful for support, emotional, physical, and financial, stressing that last word with a glance in my direction that she thought was subtle. I cleared my throat, feeling the weight of everyone's attention shift to me. "I'm thankful for boundaries," I said slowly. "And for having a place of my own where I can hear myself think." Mom's lips pressed into a line. Tessa blinked. Noah coughed. I could feel it coming, like a storm gathering off the coast. They were setting the stage. This whole night had been choreographed like a trap, and I'd walked right into it wearing a polite smile and a cashmere sweater. "I'm so glad you brought that up," Mom said sweetly, slicing into the silence like a knife through my pie. And, just like that, the room shifted. Mom's tone had that familiar softness, the one she used when she was about to make a demand, but wanted it to sound like a blessing. I'd heard it since I was little, usually before being guilted into giving Tessa my favorite doll, or later, my room, or even my spot on the college tour when money had suddenly tightened. She smiled at me across the table, eyes wide, voice sweet. "You've been doing so well for yourself, Raina. We're all so proud." There it was, the compliment before the ask. I nodded slowly, wary but silent. "You have that beautiful apartment in Cambridge, near the park, right?" Tessa chimed in, too casual. "With the built-in bookshelves and the bay window in the kitchen?" She'd only been there once, 2 years ago, when she and Mom had stopped by unannounced and spent the whole visit critiquing the decor and asking how much rent I paid. Except they knew I didn't rent. I owned it. I'd saved for years, worked overtime, made sacrifices. That apartment was my greatest quiet triumph. "I do," I said. I reached for my water, my hand steady though my chest wasn't. "Well," Mom exhaled, placing her fork down, "Tessa and Noah are in a bit of a bind right now. With the baby coming, they need something stable. And with the housing market so insane," she trailed off, letting the implication dangle in the air like bait. I didn't take it. "I thought you were staying in your townhouse?" I asked Tessa, my voice neutral. "We were," Tessa said quickly. "But it's getting cramped. The second bedroom barely fits a crib, let alone all the baby stuff. And the neighborhood's getting sketchier. Noah's worried." Noah cleared his throat. "We've been looking, but honestly, everything that's safe and spacious is out of our budget." Mom jumped back in, her voice syrupy. "That's where you come in. You've got that wonderful space. And you live alone." It landed like a slap, not a request, but a declaration. They'd made a decision and were now dressing it up in sentiment. "You want me to give them my apartment?" I asked bluntly. Tessa looked hurt, which was her specialty. Not give, Raina. Just let us move in. For a while. You could stay somewhere else. You're barely there anyway with your work schedule. I stared at her, wondering if she believed what she was saying, if she truly thought I'd uproot myself so she could waltz into my life and take the one thing I'd built for myself. I can't do that, I said evenly. The room fell quiet. Mom blinked slowly. Raina, it's your sister. She's about to become a mother. And I'm not responsible for housing her, I said, sharper than I intended. I worked for that apartment. Every square inch of it came from me, not handouts, not favors. You're being materialistic, Mom snapped, all pretense of sweetness gone. No, I said, sitting straighter. I'm setting a boundary. You all just don't like it. Dad, who had been silently chewing, finally spoke. It's just an apartment, Raina. No, Dad. It's my apartment. Tessa let out a breath like she'd been holding it. I knew you'd do this, she murmured, turning to Noah. I told you she'd make it about herself. The words scraped something raw in me. I looked around at the people I'd called family, suddenly seeing them clearly not as victims of my selfishness, but as architects of entitlement. I stood up slowly. I think I've lost my appetite. Mom stood too. Raina, don't you dare make this about you. I didn't, I said. You did. I carried my untouched pie to the counter, unsure what I'd do with it now. The room was frozen in a strange, artificial silence, like everyone was waiting for their cue in a bad play. Behind me, I heard Tessa sniffle. She's heartless, Mom muttered under her breath. And yet I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't crumble, even as the weight of years of silent favoritism settled on my shoulders like wet wool. I only thought, this has been coming for a long time. That night, I lay awake in my apartment, the city lights outside casting long, lazy shadows across the walls. The silence felt heavier than usual, a kind of pressure settling into my chest that I couldn't shake. I thought about the dinner, the forced smiles, the loaded words, and the way Mom's eyes had flickered with something I couldn't quite place. Was it disappointment? Anger? Or maybe something deeper like hurt? But for who? Me? Or herself? For the role she'd played all these years? I ran my fingers over the rough edge of the small photo frame on my bedside table, a picture of Grandma, her face warm and kind, the kind of grandmother every kid deserves, but few get. Grandma had been the one constant in all the chaos, the one who made me feel like I mattered as much as Tessa. Back then, she used to tell me stories about strength and fairness, about how family was supposed to protect you, not weigh you down. I could almost hear her voice whispering across the years, reminding me of the woman I was and the woman I still could be. The memory made the ache worse. I glanced at my phone. Messages flooded the screen, calls and texts from Mom, Dad, even Tessa. None were simple, I'm sorry notes. No. Instead, they were thinly veiled accusations and demands. Raina, why are you doing this? You're tearing the family apart. Think about Tessa and the baby. After all we've done for you. I didn't reply, because replying felt like stepping into a battlefield I wasn't ready to fight on their terms. Instead, I opened the drawer where I kept Grandma's will, the one I'd found a few days ago but hadn't dared to look at in detail until now. I pulled it out and studied the fine print under the dim light. Grandma's handwriting was elegant but firm, spelling out the division of the house between Tessa and me 50/50ths. Not a word about the parents' right to live there, only a mention that the house was to be shared equally by my granddaughters. It was a legal shield against the favoritism that had clouded our family for years. I realized then that the house wasn't just a building, it was a symbol. Of fairness, of Grandma's love, and maybe a secret way she tried to balance scales that had long been tipped. But even with that knowledge, I felt the loneliness pressing in. The family I thought I had was fracturing before my eyes. The shared history that should have been our foundation was now a battleground. And I had to decide, fight back or let it all crumble. The following morning, I called a lawyer. My hands trembled as I arranged the meeting, the words catching in my throat. It felt like betrayal, but maybe it was the only way to reclaim my place. Later that day, I sat in the cafe where I often worked remotely, my laptop open but my mind miles away. My friend Maya noticed my distracted state. "You okay?" she asked, sliding a warm cup of coffee across the table. I forced a smile. "Family stuff." She nodded. I soughed. "That can get messy." I wanted to tell her everything about the apartment, the house, the cake thrown in my face, but the words caught in my throat again. Instead, I said, "Sometimes, the people who are supposed to be your biggest supporters end up hurting you the most." Maya reached over, squeezing my hand. "You're not alone." Her kindness was a balm, but it couldn't erase the feeling that my family had quietly written me out of the story, and I had to fight to write myself back in. That evening, I deleted the family group chat on my phone. The messages kept coming, but I stopped reading them. I was done with being made to feel guilty for wanting respect. Done with being the difficult one who didn't bend to everyone else's will. I closed my eyes and whispered into the quiet apartment. This time, I'm standing my ground. The morning sun spilled through the curtains, but I felt no warmth. My apartment, usually a sanctuary, felt like a cage. I kept replaying the words from my lawyer's voicemail. "You have every right to enforce your ownership. They cannot simply live there without your consent." Ownership. The word tasted bitter. I wasn't sure I wanted to be the one to kick out my parents or even my sister. But it was clear I had to protect what was mine. I had to stop being the family's doormat. I dressed carefully, choosing a simple blouse and jeans, pulling my hair into a loose ponytail. The thought of facing Mom and Dad made my stomach twist. But I was done hiding behind polite smiles and half-truths. I drove over to the house that was supposed to be our home, but had long since become a fortress of secrets and favoritism. The lawn was neatly trimmed, a garden blooming with tulips and daisies that Grandma had once tended herself. The porch swing creaked softly in the breeze, but the house looked colder than ever. I rang the doorbell. Mom answered, her eyes narrowing as she saw me. Behind her, Dad stood in the hallway, arms crossed. Tessa peeked from the kitchen doorway, clutching her belly protectively. "Raina," Mom said, voice tight. "What are you doing here?" I took a deep breath. "We need to talk about the house." Her expression hardened. "There's nothing to talk about. We live here." "No," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We own this house together. You've been living here by our goodwill, not by right." Dad stepped forward, a sneer curling his lip. "You think you can just throw us out? This is where your family lives." "Family doesn't mean using people and calling it love," I shot back. Tessa's eyes widened. "Raina, please. I'm pregnant. You don't want to do this." Her voice cracked, and suddenly I saw a flicker of vulnerability beneath the practiced calm. I swallowed hard. It wasn't about hurting Tessa. Not really. It was about standing up for myself. "I'm not trying to hurt anyone," I said quietly. "But I can't keep sacrificing my life so you can have it easy." Mom's face flushed, anger simmering beneath the surface. "You've always been selfish." "Maybe I am," I admitted. "But at least I'm honest." The conversation spiraled quickly after that. Words became weapons, accusations flung like knives. I heard whispers from neighbors through the open windows. The house I once saw as a safe place felt like a courtroom. When I left, the weight of their glares followed me like a shadow. My phone buzzed with new messages. From Mom, "You'll regret this." From Dad, "We're family. You owe us." From Tessa, "Think about the baby." I sat in my car, hands trembling. Was I wrong to stand up? Was I destroying what was left of my family? But then I remembered the nights I spent alone, working 2 jobs to save for my apartment, while Tessa went on trips I couldn't afford. I remembered Grandma's words, fairness and strength, not silence and submission. That night, I sat by my window, the city's hum below me, and started drafting a letter. Not for my family, not yet, but for myself. "Dear Raina, you are more than their opinions, more than their demands. You deserve respect, love, and peace. This is just the beginning." I folded the paper, tucking it into my journal. Tomorrow, I would call the lawyer back. Tomorrow, I would take the next step. But tonight, I would breathe. The days after the confrontation felt like living underwater, muffled, slow, and isolating. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped, half expecting another angry text from Mom or a guilt-laden message from Tessa. But there was also a strange quiet, as if my family was retreating, unsure how to fight back. I spent mornings sitting by my small kitchen window, watching the city wake up. The scent of fresh coffee filled the air, but no warmth reached me. My apartment was a cocoon of silence, broken only by the occasional message from friends checking in, unsure what to say. Among them was Emma, my oldest friend, who knew the whole story, though we'd barely spoken in months. She sent a simple text, "Here if you need anything." That night, I let myself cry for the first time in years. Not just for the cake incident or the cold rejection, but for the years I'd spent trying to prove my worth to people who never really saw me. I thought of Grandma again, how she had tried to keep us balanced, leaving the house equally to me and Tessa, hoping for fairness in a family that rarely showed it. I decided to dig deeper into Grandma's papers, hoping to find something, anything, that could give me strength. The old filing cabinet creaked as I pulled out dusty folders, yellowed papers, and faded photographs. Among them was a stack of letters Grandma had written to Mom and Dad, reminding them of the importance of love over possession. One letter caught my eye, dated years before I was born. "Dear Margaret and Paul, remember that home is not just bricks and mortar, but the love that lives inside. Please don't let money or pride tear our family apart." I traced the handwriting with my finger, feeling a pang of loss. Grandma had seen the cracks before they spread wide. That night, I called Emma. Her voice was steady, a lifeline in the storm. "Raina, you're doing the right thing," she said. "You deserve to be treated with respect. Don't let them gaslight you into feeling guilty." Her words felt like a balm. I realized I wasn't alone. Over the next few weeks, the legal process began. Letters were exchanged, meetings held. I met my lawyer, a calm, sharp woman named Claire, who reassured me that the law was on my side. But more than that, Claire listened. She didn't tell me to forgive or forget. She told me to protect myself. Meanwhile, Mom's posts on social media became more frequent, veiled accusations, pleas for sympathy. Family friends sent me messages full of judgment, but I learned to scroll past, to shield myself from their poison. At work, I threw myself into projects, reclaiming a sense of purpose beyond family drama. Colleagues noticed my fatigue, but didn't pry. I liked it that way. One evening, a knock at my door startled me. It was Tessa. Her face was pale, eyes rimmed with tiredness. "I'm sorry, Raina," she said quietly. "For everything. I didn't see how unfair things were. I'm scared, and I didn't know how to ask for help." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to slam the door, but another part, the part that remembered our childhood, the good moments before everything cracked, softened. "Let's talk," I said. We sat on my couch for hours, unpacking years of resentment, misunderstandings, and pain. She told me about the pressure she felt from Mom and Dad, about the fear of losing their approval. I shared how invisible I'd felt, how every achievement had been overshadowed by comparisons. It wasn't a reconciliation, not yet, but it was a start. When Tessa left, I felt a strange mixture of hope and sadness. Family wasn't just about blood, it was about willingness to grow, to change. And maybe, just maybe, that door wasn't completely closed. That night, I wrote again in my journal. Family can hurt, but it can also heal. I'm learning to choose peace over pain and myself over their expectations. Tomorrow would be another day, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face it. The weeks after Tessa's visit unfolded in a strange, bittersweet rhythm. We weren't sisters in the way I'd hoped, not yet, but the conversation had cracked the frozen silence between us. I sensed that beneath her defenses was a girl struggling as much as I was, trapped by family expectations and fear. Mom, Dad, and the rest of the family? They had chosen their path, wrapped in their assumptions and judgments. I was no longer willing to dance to their tune. The legal process moved slowly but steadily. Claire, my lawyer, was a fortress of professionalism and kindness. She reminded me repeatedly that what I was fighting for wasn't just property or money, It was respect, dignity, and the right to live life on my own terms. One afternoon, Claire handed me a thick envelope. "This is the final settlement offer from your parents," she said. "They want to avoid court, but they're still demanding that you relinquish your share of the house." I sat quietly, weighing the words. The house Grandma left us was more than an asset. It was a symbol of everything I'd lost and everything I wanted to reclaim. "No," I said firmly. "I won't give up what's rightfully mine." Days later, news came that my parents had refused to budge. They were determined to make me the villain, the selfish daughter, tearing the family apart. But I wasn't afraid anymore. At work, my projects flourished. I earned a promotion, a recognition of years of hard work I'd always fought for quietly. I started attending therapy, peeling back layers of guilt and learning to set boundaries. Most importantly, I started rebuilding myself, piece by piece, moment by moment. One crisp morning, I received a letter from Tessa. She wrote about the baby, how tiny and perfect she was, how scared she'd been to face motherhood without support. "I want you to be part of her life," the letter said. "If you'll have me." Tears blurred my vision. The offer was fragile, like the first buds of spring after a long winter. I didn't respond right away. I needed to be sure. Weeks later, I visited their home for the first time since the fallout. The house felt different, warmer, not because of the walls, but because Tessa was holding our daughter, smiling shyly as she offered me a cup of tea. The moment was imperfect, raw, but real. I looked around, seeing not the family that had rejected me, but the new family I could choose to be part of. "I want to try," I said softly. And we did. Not everything was perfect. Old wounds sometimes opened, words were said in frustration, and the past lingered in shadows. But slowly, we built something new, based on honesty, respect, and love. That night, back in my apartment, I opened Grandma's old journal, a book I'd kept close all these months. In her neat handwriting, she'd written, "Family is not always blood, but the willingness to grow together, to forgive, and to hold space for each other's scars." I smiled, feeling the truth in her words resonate deep within me. For the first time in years, I felt whole. I was no longer the girl hiding behind silence and sacrifice. I was Raina, strong, independent, and free. And my future was mine to write.